This first film was called All the Time in the World, and it was based on a young, clumsy guy who has a watch that can reverse time by a few moments so that he can redo any mistakes he makes. For this film I was going to direct, but as the story wasn't fully my idea, I gave that role up to try out sound. The restrictions on the film were very difficult, as keeping to 6 lines and only 3 main characters made creating our story challenging. However, we managed to work around it as a group by only having 1 main character and the rest as extras, as well as using more of our visual language skills to portray the story without a load of dialogue. There are many stories that are similar to our idea, however the film About Time, directed by Richard Curtis, I would say definitely helped spark our idea. It circles a man whose family has the power to travel in time. This man is also pretty clumsy to begin with. For example, everyone kisses a partner at midnight on New Year's Eve, but he messes up, so he turns back in time to redo the situation and kisses her. We wanted this kind of feel to the film. A cute, clumsy protagonist who tries to impress the females but sometimes fails. However, we wanted the story to end with a twist, so the watch stops working just as he used it to be rude to his teacher, and he ends up getting stuck with a broken watch and an angry teacher. The main theory that struck us as the most relatable was Chekhov's gun. He said, if in the first act you have hung a pistol on the wall, then in the following one it should be fired, otherwise don't put it there. And in my interpretation, this says that using iconography to suggest one thing will happen means that it should happen. Therefore, we used this theory within our film with the close-up of the watch and the time on the phone at the beginning, which suggested a significance in this watch and helped with getting the story across to the audience. Sadly, I didn't get to be the role I wanted in this film, however I've always wanted to try and learn elements of the sound department. Therefore I tried out being in charge of the sound on set as well as the boom operator. It did take me a while to work out how to use the equipment as I had never used a recording set before, but I did get the hang of it. We did have an issue whilst recording the sound, as I thankfully decided to test out the equipment and see if the memory card worked with my laptop. However, it didn't work, so I had to change the memory card. As well as this, the batteries for the Zoom had also stopped working, so I had to go and get some more to replace it, which delayed the whole production time, but we still managed to get it done. Also, we had an issue in post-production as we couldn't find the right soundtrack for the bedroom scene when the protagonist is putting his bag on. There is no sound, which we never recorded as I didn't think we were going to use the shot, and that was a bad mistake. However, this has taught me that in sound everything should be recorded so that even if we have too much, it's better than not enough. Furthermore, my role wasn't one of the main ones that I would have preferred. However, I believe it played an important part to the film. The recording of the dialogue and the diegetic foley were significant in helping tell the story. For example, the alarm on the phone going off in the first scene was key iconography to reinforce the main theme of time throughout the film. As well as this, the dialogue at the end especially was an important part of the storytelling and getting across to the audience the humour that in the end, when the protagonist tries to take advantage of the watch, he is punished. This also reinforces a moral to the story, which is to never take advantage of a good thing in your life, as it can end in hurt or upset, and although technically we didn't execute this story to the best of our ability, it was a good base to something that could be made better in our future film careers. So for the next film, I would like to change my role to something that I believe I could do better in and show my full potential as a film student. In my opinion, this film wasn't really our best work, and I think that the pre-production was a bit unorganised, so I did try and help out by booking equipment, etc. But it did show me that one role can create a whole lot of difference to the film if it isn't done properly, or if that person isn't as organised. So every role on a film is crucial to creating a good story. Our story wasn't shown on the deadline day, as some of us felt too embarrassed because we know it wasn't a good film and the story wasn't very clear. However, the making of this film has taught me a lot more about storytelling. I have realised how difficult it is to make a good film, and you can't just hope for the best on the day because pre-production is just as important as all the other roles. So next time I'm in a film group, I will make sure we're all organised with our individual roles. The target audience for our film wasn't properly specified, however we did decide to aim it at younger adults, mainly because we are all young adults making the film, so we thought it would be easier to make a more relatable film to them through the use of the dialogue and the main character's age. Finally, I do believe that our film could have been much more engaging if we were more organised about it all. We also didn't explore too much into using and incorporating different cultures, which is something to take note of for next time, to add a bit more uniqueness for my my film I am next on. I think this film was just one big learning curve, and I will take on board every mistake and use them to help create something much better and more interesting in the future. Our second film is called Concrete Butterfly, and it was based on a young male protagonist who is a drug runner for his homophobic father, and it turns out the young male is actually gay himself. For this film I decided to edit, as that is one of my strongest areas and something I'd like to pursue further. As a group, our narrative was inspired by the short film Drug Runner, directed by Charlotte Regan, as the main character is a young boy running drugs across London to get money. We decided to do this idea as it adds more flavour and uniqueness to the story to make it a bit more interesting for the viewer. As well as this, Charlotte Regan did another film that inspired us with the look of the film, which was Stand By. This film centred the growth of a relationship between a newly recruited policewoman and a policeman who has been in the business for a long time. The man begins with finding the woman annoying, but then the twist at the end is that they become good friends. This whole film is shot in one frame, which we really liked, and it inspired us to create our own film and shoot it in one frame, as again it added uniqueness because I don't think I've seen many short films shot like that. As well as this, Moonlight, directed by Barry Jenkins, opens with one continuous moving shot with no cuts, which also inspired the editing for our film, as the scene that introduces the climax isn't cut at all, it's just one continuous shot, so that the audience can focus more on the dialogue. For this brief there weren't many restrictions, apart from the fact that it could only be up to 5 minutes long, which we thought at first would be easy to fill. However, when it came to editing, it was very difficult to cut it down to 5 minutes from 8.5 minutes. We had to cut the whole last scene out because it wasn't actually needed to help make the story make sense, although it was a nice ending that took us a lot to get rid of, but we had to. There weren't any specific cultural considerations we had to make, it was more of showing the story of a man who struggled to come out to his homophobic father. We had to go about this correctly and respectfully, as some people who watch this film will have gone through what we're showing. I've showed this film to my friend who had trouble coming out to his dad and he loved it, so I believe we executed that well. I edited this film, which took a lot longer than I thought it would considering it was only in one shot. However, this made it harder for me to cut so that the story wasn't too boring or showed too much of the same thing. The director and I decided to cut a lot out of it that didn't really need to be there. It was hard to get rid of as it did look good, but we just had too much footage and it wasn't needed. We also decided to do more jump cuts at the beginning to create more of a fast pace so that the fight scene at the end wasn't too jarring. When I first cut it together, the pace of the whole film was quite slow until it hit the end, which didn't look good, so I just had to change it. The role of the editor is so important when it comes to creating a good story. When it came to editing this film, I felt as if I had a lot of responsibility to make sure the film made sense and was interesting enough to keep the audience wanting more. If anything, I feel as if the editing is the main skill that is needed to bring the story together and make it a good film for people to watch, because otherwise, if the shots are all in different places or there is no continuity, it just wouldn't work. For example, when I was syncing the monologue voiceovers to the different parts in the film, they had to be placed alongside a clip that worked. So when he says, "Me and my dad got along well though," it would make sense for me to put a clip of the protagonist and his dad that shows their bond, which I did. Therefore my role contributed a lot towards the film, because without the editor there would be no film. However, if there was one thing I could change about the film, it would be for me to make my jump cuts on the sequence of the two males chatting to be more crisp. We ran out of time to change it by the time we realised, so it's definitely something I can keep in mind for next time I edit a film. Overall, I am pleased with the job I did on this film. I believe it looks exactly how the director and I wanted it to look, and I was able to use my creativity and editing skills to the best of my ability, which has made me excited to edit more films in the future. Our target audience for this film was mainly younger people ages 19 to mid-30s who like watching social dramas, and possibly a secondary target audience, homosexual people, as that was part of the main storyline. We used two young male protagonists for the story so that the target audience and secondary target audience could relate to it more and would find it more engaging. Editing this film has definitely made me more aware of the importance of telling a story correctly and clearly so that the audience can be kept more engaged. Before this, I would be focusing mainly on the technical aspects, like does this shot look good in focus, or was that jump cut right? But as all of this is still extremely important to the look and the quality of the film, I have become a lot more focused on whether the story is actually interesting whether it makes sense, and whether it's engaging enough to catch people's attention. This is something I believe is extremely important, and from learning how to look deeper into the actual storyline, it will now make me a better and more confident filmmaker.